If we don't talk about real strategies, you're just going to stay stuck, right? You're going to stay stuck. You're going to stay doubtful. You're going to stay discouraged. And I don't want that for you. Well, hey, welcome back to the Amanda Kaufman Show for this solo episode where I want to talk to you about imposter syndrome. When I first started my coaching business, I felt so intimidated by it. There all the things I didn't know, all the things I had opted out of in my prior version of my life that I now needed to become really important. So, for example, when I was working in a corporate job, I kind of opted out of the networking as much as I could. I just wanted to stay really, really focused to my goals in my corporate career. For example, social media. In my prior career, it was really frowned upon, especially at the time, to use social media because the company was scared of vulnerabilities and social engineering and so on. As well, they should be. I mean, like, it's a great big crazy world out there, but their training and education at the time, because social media was so new, was don't do it. So I didn't do it. The list goes on and on, but the point is that when I wanted something new for my career and how I earned money, I had to activate things that I didn't think were important until I realized how important they were. One of those really big things was around the social journey. Like I said, I was like really, really, really focused in my prior corporate career that when it came time to like be someone else's coach, I was like, I don't know anybody. My prior career involved traveling to different corporate sites like in person. And so I was getting into a town car at 4:30 in the morning on Mondays. And it would sometimes be midnight or close to it when I got home on Thursday nights. And it was just like 20 hours a week of just commuting between where I live and where my client's project site was. So I spent a ridiculous amount of time either on the road, or if I was socializing with people, they were like in another state, and it was all professional. It wasn't a personal relationship whatsoever. So when I decided that I wanted to do this instead of that, become an entrepreneur and become a coach and be somebody that people could look to for coaching support, I had no idea how much growth I would have to go through to get to a place where I was going to be successful at that. And that's what I want to talk to you about today, on this little solo episode, is the idea around imposter syndrome. Let's cover that. I also want to talk about like what to do about it, right? Because we can talk about how it freezes us and it stops us all day long, but if we don't talk about real strategies to do something about it, you're just going to stay stuck, right? You're going to stay stuck. You're going to stay doubtful. You're going to stay discouraged. And I don't want that for you. And then from there, I want to talk to you about, so what, now what, And so let's get into it. What is imposter syndrome? And it turns out like one of the solutions to imposter syndrome is actually baked right in to this very question. What is imposter syndrome anyway? So I had not heard of imposter syndrome until I became a corporate employee, primarily based in the United States, that I started to really hear the term, and it was used a lot. And a lot of people will tell you that imposter syndrome is when you are very, very qualified and you feel out of place when you go to perform. And that's imposter syndrome. And so I literally never heard of it before I had moved to the United States with my career. It was a few years into my career. And I'll be honest with you, when in my early days of my career, I really was straight up ignorant about diversity and equity and inclusion. I was really optimistic. I have a degree in chemical engineering, and that particular discipline of engineering does attract more of the female persuasion than other disciplines, just kind of a fun fact. So I hadn't really thought about what the ramifications of imposter syndrome could be until I started to get to an age and a life stage where my life started to come into conflict with my work life. I was such a good analyst, kind of the beginner level. in consulting because I was so excellent at just saying, yes, yes, I'll do that. Yes, I'll do that. Yes, sign me up. Yes, 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 yes. And I'm not sure that I would recommend any young person do different than that. I think that that's a great way to put yourself in the way of like learning things, and especially if you're still not totally sure about what you want to create. So I said, yes, 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 yes. But then, when I was about 25, I met my now husband and I started to, make moves towards familyhood. He was married previously, so I got a couple of bonus kids. And it was kind of interesting how things shifted at work really quickly, not because I was initiating the shift, but because so many people were responding to me differently, knowing a little bit about my personal background. So I learned like really quickly not to bring up the kids, not to talk about that in the workplace, not because I didn't want to talk about my kids, not because I wasn't proud of my kids, but because I noticed that I stopped getting as many opportunities handed my way because people were making assumptions about what my priorities were on the basis of my gender. Like for the first time ever, and it wasn't just the gender. They thought they were being polite by not overloading the mom. Right? They thought they were being polite by not overwhelming me or putting me into a position. So it's so interesting because I it was so opposite to what I wanted. You know, in my career, it was a big deal for me to be able to go to university. And it was a big deal for me to get the job and the opportunity at that company. And I wanted more. I wanted to grow. I wanted to, have this impressive track record and I wanted all of that. So rather than put me in the position of having to explain it's okay, I have people that help me with my children, or it's okay, like this is a known desire, it was just easier for me to just like not discuss it. So I didn't feel like an imposter because I got married and I had kids built in. And I didn't feel like an imposter later when I had more kids. The imposter feeling really started to come up for me when I started really pushing my growth in new areas and stepping into new rooms that I wasn't necessarily being asked or invited into, just like showing up, doing the work and then getting picked and then getting invited. And when I did that, I started to hear and read a lot more about this imposter syndrome thing. And it got in my head. It got in my head in a big way that, women in corporate America are supposed to have imposter syndrome, and I didn't question it. Not until years later. Fast forward a few years, I've now become an entrepreneur. I've now decided that I am going to go all in on this thing. And I was confronted by all of these skills, these capabilities, these things that established entrepreneurs just seem to magically know how to do. I was confronted by the fact that I didn't know how to do anything, right? And I don't mean like anything. Obviously, I'd been successful in the prior career, but it felt like I was such a fish out of water with selling, with knowing what to market, with knowing how to find out information, with knowing how to actually do this thing. What's really interesting about entrepreneurship is a lot of people get into it because they want the freedom. But the other side of the freedom coin is you have so many options. You have so many decisions. And I didn't realize that there was a version of freedom in my employee world where I was free of a lot of decisions. I didn't have to make a lot of decisions. I knew how much I was going to get paid. I didn't get to decide that. I didn't have to decide that. Didn't have to decide how to dress. Didn't have to decide where to go. Didn't have to decide what my work hours were. Didn't have to decide what the standards were for my work deliverables. Like it was all decided for me. And there's kind of a freedom in that, right? But being the rebellious and creative type that I actually am, I appreciated and strongly desired the ability to make new rules and to lead myself and others through different rules. So that's why entrepreneurship was ultimately perfect for me. But there was this season, this period where I didn't know anything, or I just felt stuck, because I didn't have the experience in that area. So I kept hearing, and especially in the coaching world, imposter syndrome, imposter syndrome. The reason why you're not succeeding is imposter syndrome. And I was bought into that, like just hook, line, and sinker. I was absolutely convinced, yep, I've got imposter syndrome because that's what everybody says that they have. And here's the part where I tell you what to do about it. What actually is imposter syndrome? kind of coming right back to that. It's a very, I think, dangerous idea because, first of all, if you're assigning yourself a syndrome, and you're assigning yourself a syndrome, like that is a big deal because if you have a syndrome, that means that there's nothing you can do about it. And because it's just pervasive, it's just like, it's just who you are, right? It's a syndrome. And if you're an imposter, it means you don't belong. That's what it means. You don't belong here. So for you to have imposter syndrome, that means that there's nothing you can do about it. You don't belong here. And I'll never forget this. It just occurred to me one day. I was like, what is this anyway? Because I am into psychology. I am into high performance. I love reading books and studies and everything. And I noticed that imposter syndrome was appearing on websites and in literature and in blogs, but it wasn't showing up necessarily in more academic spots. I'm like, that's weird. And then I realized, I was like, I've not heard this term until I was working in higher levels of corporate America. Like I didn't even hear the term. And I'm like, that's weird. Like I don't recall ever hearing it when I was growing up in the remote Arctic town that I grew up in. I was like, this is so interesting. So I looked into it and I had assumed, and I think a lot of people do, that imposter syndrome is a diagnosis that you're going to find in the handbook for like therapists and psychologists that tell you like all the things that could be wrong with you mentally. It turns out there is no such entry, there is no such page dedicated to imposter syndrome because it's not a real syndrome. Fast forward a couple of years, I was on Facebook and one of my clients tagged me in a video that just like rocked my world. And I'll have to ask the team to include the link to the video below this because I honestly cannot remember exactly who said it. But she was giving a commencement speech and she was talking about bicycle face. And bicycle face was a diagnosis that was given around the time that the bicycle came out. Now, here's what's really interesting. Men never got bicycle face. Bicycle face was for women who had been riding their bikes. Now, think about this. If you're riding a bike, you're probably exerting yourself. You're probably like pushing against the wind, right? It's normal to be flushed when you exercise. And they had turned it into this like whole big diagnosis, which thank goodness is no longer around. But the point that they made in the speech, and we really must get the link below, that imposter syndrome is kind of the same thing. Whenever you go to do something new, you're going to have uncertainty. You're going to be unsure and you're going to have doubts about what you're doing because you've never done it before. And that doesn't make you an imposter. That makes you normal, And the idea that only very educated people, particularly women or minorities, can get this syndrome, I think is super harmful. Because you're not an imposter because of your age. You're not an imposter because of your gender or who you pray to or anything like that. Like, what a preposterous idea, And you're certainly not an imposter if you've educated yourself. Now, you might actually still be facing some nerves, facing some worries, maybe even triggered into anxiety. I'm not a mental health professional. I'm a high performance coach. I'm a business coach. It's possible you feel uncomfortable. But there is worlds of difference between feeling uncomfortable in a situation and not belonging there, And when I realized it's not a real mental health condition. It's not an actual syndrome and is only ascribed to people who look different than the people who are already sitting in the room. I got to tell you, the thing I really did about that is I said, forget it. Forget it. Forget that you were ever told what imposter syndrome is. Just know thyself, to know that like when you go to do something new, you might have to take a nice, deep, enriching breath before you go do it. You might need to prepare for that particular circumstance. As a high performance coach, I've worked with so many very high achievers who've achieved amazing things, but they struggle with accepting the idea, and this is an egoic issue, right? Their ego has a really hard time with the idea that they're doing something actually new. When you want to go advertise on the internet and you've never done it before, there's a lot of things that you're going to get made aware of and presenced to when you go to do that activity. And the fact you don't automatically already know what to expect because you have some PhD or you have some master's degree or because you've got 20 years of experience in this other domain, that doesn't make you an imposter. It doesn't give you a syndrome. It makes you somebody who is on a learning journey. And, you're not bad for wanting to learn more. There's nothing wrong with you because your heart rate is quickening because you're worried that people are going to laugh at you. That's all very normal stuff. And I've worked with enough men to know that they feel that too, right? Like I think a lot of times when we have these conversations about who's an imposter, who's not an imposter, I do think that there is a level of comfortability that you'll have when you're in a group of people that look and sound and act like you. There's no getting away from that. But even then, even that said, it doesn't mean that you are incapable of learning a new capability, a new competency, something new. So what and what now? If you've been telling yourself, I can't do it because I have imposter syndrome, in the words of Bob Newhart, stop it. Stop it, right? Like just choose challenge over the diagnosis. Choose the challenge over the diagnosis because, you may legitimately have real concerns, with mental health. You don't need a fake one. You don't need a pretend one on top of it. And it's just very likely that your own personal growth and development includes emotional regulation around not knowing everything. All right. Well, thanks for joining me for the Amanda Kaufman Show. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in another episode. In the meantime, if this is really helpful, go ahead and share it with 3 of your friends and leave an honest review. If you loved this, if you want more people to find out about it, the best way to let them know is to leave a 5-star review. Thanks so much for being here. Don't forget to subscribe, and we will see you next time.